It began quietly, too quietly, according to the new owners. The modern home above the Sunset Strip had the kind of stillness that pressed against your chest when the air conditioning turned off. At first, they blamed the echoes on the architecture. High ceilings, concrete floors, open glass walls that faced the city. But when lights flickered only in one room, Matthew Perry's old writing studio, they started to wonder if something else remained. The house had been on the market for months after Perry's passing. Neighbors said no one stayed there long. Some claimed it wasn't because of the price, but because of the sound of faint clicking, like someone typing on a laptop at 3 a.m. Others spoke of the pool lights turning on by themselves, always around the same hour he was found. The new owners, a young couple named Jordan and Elise, didn't believe in hauntings. They were drawn to the home for its privacy and history. "It's a piece of Hollywood," Jordan said during the open house. The realtor didn't mention the subtle chill in the hallway near the den, or the faint smell of chlorine that never went away even after multiple cleanings. On their first night, the city lights shimmered through the glass like embers. Elise awoke around 2:30 a.m. to a soft splashing outside. The pool was illuminated, though she was certain they hadn't turned on the lights. As she stepped onto the patio, she saw the ripples settle, as if someone had just slipped beneath the surface. When she looked at the house's reflection in the water, she noticed a dim shape in the upstairs window, someone standing in the old office. The next morning, Jordan checked the cameras. Nothing. Every feed was normal except for a single frame in the security log, one still image, blurred but distinct. A man, facing away, in a white t-shirt, his hair wet, shoulders slouched forward like he'd just come from the pool. They tried to explain it away. Maybe a glitch, maybe light distortion. But as days went on, they started to feel watched. The studio room always carried a low hum, and the computer on the desk, brand new, would sometimes wake itself, screen glowing with a blank document titled, "Could I Be More Here?" The neighbors told them something later. After Perry's passing, a local electrician came to shut down the outdoor lighting system. He swore he saw a figure sitting by the pool steps, feet dangling in the water, though the house was locked. The man said he quit working after that day. Jordan decided to test the theory. He left a voice recorder in the studio overnight, asking simple questions: "Why are you here?" and "Do you want to be remembered?" The next morning, they played it back. Most of it was static. But near the end, a faint whisper came through, gentle, almost sad. "Just one word, friends." Elise cried. She said the voice didn't sound angry, just lonely. They've kept the lights on in the studio ever since. Not because they're afraid, but because the darkness feels disrespectful, like closing the curtain on someone who isn't ready to leave the stage. The days that followed blurred into a soft rhythm of unease. Nothing dramatic happened, no slamming doors, no floating objects, just a quiet persistence, like the feeling of a memory that refuses to fade. Elise tried to keep herself busy, filling the kitchen with the smell of roasted coffee each morning, keeping the house bright and full of sound. But even music didn't seem to carry right in that place. Voices flattened. Laughter hung too long in the corners. The studio upstairs remained the heart of it all. Jordan had tried closing it off, locking the door and claiming he needed a break from the nonsense. Yet each night, without fail, the soft glow of the monitor bled under the doorframe, always around 2:40 a.m. The power logs later showed no record of activity, but the lights were real. Elise would see it from the backyard, reflected faintly in the pool water, as if someone inside was still working through a script. Neighbors began to whisper when they passed by. One, an older woman named Denise, who had lived on the hill for 20 years, brought over banana bread and a warning. "He loved that place," she said, nodding toward the sprawling house. "Used to sit out back alone, staring at the water for hours. Said it was the only place he felt normal." Her voice lowered. "I think he's still trying to feel that." The couple didn't know what to do with that. Jordan, pragmatic and tech-minded, started searching for logical explanations: faulty wiring, electrical interference, old memory circuits left running in the house's smart system. But nothing connected. The servers had been wiped, security reinstalled, new routers set. Still, once in a while, their phones would buzz with an alert: studio motion detected. One night, Jordan decided to face it directly. He sat at the desk, the same spot where Perry once wrote notes for his memoir. Outside, the city pulsed with the quiet hum of traffic, a low ocean of distant sound. The laptop sat idle, cursor blinking on an empty document. He waited. 5 minutes. 10. Then, without warning, the cursor began to move, typing single letters that formed no words. Just a long line of scattered attempts, backspaces, restarts. As if someone were trying, but couldn't quite find what to say. He hit record on his phone, heart pounding but steady. "If you're here," he said aloud, his voice catching slightly, "you can finish your sentence." The typing stopped. The monitor flickered. Then, letter by letter, it wrote, "Can you hear me now?" Jordan stared until the screen went dark again. He didn't tell Elise right away. He wasn't sure he believed it himself. But the next day, when she went to open the studio, the doorknob was wet as though someone had just stepped out from the pool and tried to enter. That evening, they sat together on the patio, watching the lights of Los Angeles breathe in the distance. Elise broke the silence. "He didn't sound angry on that recording," she said quietly. "He sounded lost, like he's looking for something familiar." Jordan nodded, his gaze fixed on the water. "Maybe he doesn't realize he's gone." The pool light flickered then, once, a slow pulse that shimmered across their faces. Neither of them moved. The air smelled faintly of chlorine, and beneath it something else. The scent of an old candle, maybe, or a cologne faintly mixed with night air. After that night, the small incidents began to thread together, music playing softly from nowhere, faint laughter echoing from the hallway when no one else was home. Elise caught her reflection in the living room glass one evening, and for a second, she swore someone else stood behind her, a man's outline, slightly blurred, as if seen through moving water. They tried reaching out to a local historian, someone who specialized in celebrity properties, hoping for some clue that would ground the experience. The man told them about the renovations the studio Perry had built himself, the pool's exact tile pattern he had personally chosen to mirror the ocean's horizon. "He poured himself into that place," the historian said. "When people like him go, sometimes what they've built doesn't let them leave." That night, Elise couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., she wandered down the stairs barefoot, the marble cool under her feet. The air was heavy with silence. She stood by the glass wall, looking at the city stretched out below like a field of stars. Then, from behind her, a soft splash, a sound so small it could have been mistaken for a dream. She turned. The pool shimmered faintly, disturbed by a ripple that spread outward from the middle. And there, for a brief, breath-stopping moment, she saw it just under the surface. The faint, distorted shape of a man's face, eyes open, calm, watching her. When she blinked, it was gone. The water was smooth again. Elise didn't scream. She just stood there, frozen, her breath clouding the glass. In that stillness, she whispered, "You're not alone anymore. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story." Elise didn't tell Jordan right away. She spent the next morning moving slowly, stirring sugar into her coffee until it dissolved into nothing, watching the pale swirl disappear as if it could take her thoughts with it. The house felt heavier that day, the way certain mornings do after a dream you can't shake. Even the sunlight seemed cautious, cutting through the tall windows in thin, uncertain stripes. Jordan noticed her quietness but said nothing. He had started pretending that the house wasn't bothering him either. He walked with his phone out, scrolling through emails, checking camera feeds, pretending that the flickering lights and motion alerts were just software glitches. But the truth was, the place had begun to work its way under his skin. Every sound, every change in air pressure, every faint echo of dripping water made him stop and listen. That afternoon, he found Elise standing by the pool again. She was staring at the water, her reflection broken by the slow movement of the filter jets. "You shouldn't keep coming out here at night," he said softly. She nodded but didn't look away. "Do you remember how he died?" she asked. Jordan hesitated. "Yeah, the reports said." "I read them," she interrupted. "But there's something they don't say. He was alone. No one knew for hours. Her voice was quiet, almost tender. That's what it feels like here, like someone's still alone. He didn't answer. Instead, he sat down beside her on the edge of the patio. The smell of damp tile and chlorine hung between them. Somewhere far below, traffic whispered across the city. For a long time, they just listened. Later that night, Elise woke again. This time, not from a sound, but from a feeling like someone standing close enough that she could sense them before seeing them. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed 2:47 a.m. She lay still, heart thudding in her throat. There was no movement, no light, just the faint hum of the air system. But then came the sound barely audible, distant, from upstairs. A chair sliding gently across the studio floor. She slipped from bed, padding barefoot through the hall. The air grew colder with each step. The door to the studio was ajar. Inside, the computer screen glowed faintly, a white rectangle cutting through the dark. The document on the screen had changed. I tried. Just those two words, centered, the cursor blinking beside them. Elise whispered, "Tried what?" The light flickered. The reflection in the glass wall across from her shifted, the shape of someone standing behind her. Still, waiting. She turned quickly, but there was no one there. Just the empty corridor and the faint echo of her own breathing. By morning, the message on the screen was gone. The file itself had vanished. Jordan insisted it was a sleep-deprived hallucination, maybe a leftover from a draft file syncing on the cloud. But when he checked the system history, there were no saved versions. No autosave, no log entry, no trace of any text ever typed. That was when they called in someone. Not a psychic, not a priest, just a man who worked with historical restorations. Someone who'd handled old homes with strange energy. He had calm eyes, a silver beard, and a way of listening that made the silence less intimidating. He walked through the house slowly, touching walls, pausing near corners. When he reached the studio, he stopped. "This room holds memory," he said quietly. "It's not evil, but something here hasn't finished." He turned toward the pool, visible through the wide glass doors. Places like this keep a kind of echo. When someone leaves too suddenly, that echo doesn't know where to go. Jordan exhaled sharply. "So what do we do? Move out? Burn sage?" The man smiled slightly. "Talk to him. Sometimes acknowledgement is all that's left to give." That night they tried. They lit a small candle on the desk and sat together in front of the screen. The house around them seemed to hold its breath. Elise spoke first. Her voice trembled but didn't break. "You're still here. We know that. You don't have to be alone anymore. You can rest." For a few moments, nothing. Then, faintly, the air shifted, the candle flame bent sideways. Not from a draft, but from something unseen. And on the darkened computer screen, a faint reflection appeared. The outline of a man, standing behind them, shoulders slumped, head tilted slightly in gratitude or apology. Elise reached for Jordan's hand. "It's him," she whispered. They sat like that for several minutes, until the image faded and the candle burned low. Then the monitor flickered once, briefly illuminating the room. Across the bottom of the blank screen, faint text appeared, almost invisible against the glow. "Thank you." The next morning, the studio was different. The air felt lighter, almost hollow, as if something that had been pressing down on the space had finally released. The smell of chlorine was gone. The pool water outside looked ordinary again, bright and harmless under the California sun. And yet, that night, when Elise stood by the window before bed, she thought she saw a faint shimmer by the pool's edge, just a quick flash, like the reflection of someone walking away into the light. She smiled softly to herself. "Goodbye, Matthew," she whispered. But somewhere deep in the walls of that quiet house, as the city below drifted into sleep, a faint echo answered back, gentle, almost affectionate. Just one word, barely carried through the still air. "Thanks." The next few weeks passed without incident. For the first time since moving in, the house felt ordinary, almost tender in its silence. The lights stayed steady, the pool remained still, and the studio upstairs no longer buzzed with invisible energy. Elise began to open the curtains again in the mornings, letting the sunlight wash through the wide glass windows and warm the hardwood floors. Even the shadows in the hallway seemed softer. Jordan noticed it too. He stopped checking the cameras before bed, stopped scrolling through the power logs for patterns that no longer existed. Sometimes he would stand on the balcony at night, drink in hand, watching the city's pulse far below the moving lines of headlights and the quiet shimmer of life, and think that maybe the house had simply needed time to breathe again. But the strange thing about peace is how it can hide the smallest tremor beneath it. One evening, as the two of them were eating dinner, Elisa's phone buzzed with a notification. Studio motion detected. Her fork froze mid-air. Probably a glitch, Jordan said automatically, though his voice lacked conviction. They both turned their heads toward the ceiling. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock. Jordan sighed, pushed back from the table, and went upstairs. The studio door was half open, the faint scent of ozone lingering in the air. The computer, dark for weeks, was on. The screen showed a blank white document. He felt a cold rush of recognition, that same electric chill he hadn't felt since the night of the candle. Then, slowly, words began to appear on the screen. "Don't forget me." He stood frozen, his reflection trembling in the monitor's glow. The message blinked twice and vanished, replaced by a single line, "You were kind." Jordan whispered, "You're welcome," though his throat tightened around the words. He called Elise upstairs, but by the time she arrived, the document was empty again. She believed him. She didn't question or deny it. Instead, she reached out and turned off the monitor, her fingers trembling against the power button. "Maybe that's just his way of saying goodbye again," she said softly. The house seemed to exhale after that. They slept deeply that night, without interruption, without the hum of invisible presence pressing against their dreams. A month later, they decided to invite a few friends over for dinner, their first gathering since moving in. The place came alive with laughter, voices bouncing off the glass walls, the smell of grilled food and red wine filling the air. For a while, it felt like any other Los Angeles home, bright, alive, warm. It was just before midnight when the last guests left. Elise stepped outside to collect a few empty glasses near the pool. The night was cool and unusually quiet. Even the city below seemed to hold its breath. She paused by the water, staring at her own reflection rippling faintly on the surface. Then she saw it, another reflection beside hers, faint and shimmering, as though someone were standing just behind her shoulder. But this time she didn't feel afraid. The figure was smiling faintly, gently, as if grateful. The pool light beneath the water flickered, casting a soft golden ripple across his face before fading. When she turned around, there was no one there. She whispered into the night, "You can rest now." The next morning, Jordan found a single damp footprint near the studio doorway, bare, human, leading inward but not out. The air inside the room was warm, filled with the scent of coffee, though neither of them had brewed any yet. On the desk sat a printed sheet of paper, one that hadn't been there before. It bore a short message, typed neatly, "Keep it light, always." Below the line was a signature, faint but unmistakable, the looping curve of an M. Elise folded the paper carefully and slipped it into a frame, setting it on the bookshelf by the window. From then on, neither of them spoke of it much. They didn't need to. Months passed. Seasons shifted. The jacaranda trees outside the property bloomed violet against the pale sky. The house became theirs, not haunted, not heavy, just alive in a quieter, deeper way. They learned to live alongside the memory of the man who once filled its walls with laughter and loneliness. Sometimes, when the nights were very still, Jordan would step outside, lean on the railing, and glance at the pool. The water would gleam with that familiar faint reflection of the stars, and, now and then, a tiny shimmer of movement, like a ripple beginning to form and then disappearing before it reached the edge. He never mentioned it to Elise. It didn't feel like something that needed explaining. It felt like acknowledgement, a quiet nod from somewhere in between. And when the house finally sold years later, the new owners found it perfectly normal. They never mentioned strange sounds, flickering lights, or whispers in the night. But the very first evening they moved in, as they unpacked boxes and laughed about the echoes in the open rooms, the pool lights outside flickered just once and then steadied again, reflecting a calm, ghostly shimmer that lingered on the surface, like someone smiling from beneath the water. It was gone before they noticed, and somewhere far above Los Angeles, where the hills slope toward the glittering city, the house of Matthew Perry stood quietly under the night sky, peaceful at last, but never truly empty. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.